Hey there, my name is Rachael Kalaki.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Shelby, and welcome to the Magdala Podcast.
We know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem.
The need for women to be accompanied in their journey toward healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here.
Magdala is a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom from sexual addiction through support, community, and accountability.
Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to discussions on how to live fully as a Catholic woman.
You are not alone, and wherever you are on your journey, we welcome you to this table.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Magdala Podcast. This is Rachael with a solo episode for you. I know they're everybody's favorites. Just kidding, probably not. But hey, rants are good space fillers. So here we go. It's one of those days today where I've had like 3 cups of coffee and still just feel as tired as when I woke up. Which I know is probably my own fault, but anyway, my son is going through a phase of not really wanting to sleep at night. But did you come here to listen to a podcast on 6-month-old sleep? No, you didn't. Nor did you come to listen to a podcast about my coffee consumption. So I will move on to what we're actually going to talk about today, which is this kind of dichotomous attitude I see in the approach to sexuality, just a personal approach. And this is kind of something we see often within Magdala. And I guess the way I want to start with this is just thinking about how Satan loves extremes. But you've probably heard that maxim before that, Satan works in extremes. And he pushes us to brinks. He doesn't have any limits. God's voice, God's presence is gentle, it's inviting, whereas Satan pushes. And so therefore he has no boundaries. And I've begun to think that there's a little something in human nature that really loves extremes too. Or is just vulnerable to them. And maybe that's why we're able to be tempted towards them by the enemy. But Dietrich von Hildebrand talks about, in Trojan Horse in the City of God, he talks about how often when you have 2 opposing sides, when you have 2 extremes, we think, truth is in the means or something, but, the kind of Aristotelian thought there, or truth is in balance, truth is in the median. But von Hildebrand says that often truth is actually more unlike both of the extremes than they are unlike each other. The truth transcends above these opposing sides. It's not necessarily in the middle point of these 2 poles, so to speak. And I find this is really true with many things, sexuality being among them. And I talk a lot about the polarizing cultures that sexuality has found itself in the last several decades. We have that of the sexual revolution and hookup culture, but also the disordered response to this chaos that became purity culture. And it's easy to get caught up in this pendulum swing between these two when both are actually disordered. And the truth is actually more unlike both of those things than they are unlike each other. And we get caught up in that swing usually in not so obvious ways. We embrace hookup culture's claims when we let sex be something casual and transactional, when we treat its sacredness flippantly, when we consume pornography, when we sexually act out in compulsive ways and have no scope of self-mastery. And we also, conversely, we embrace purity culture's rigidity and shame when we beat ourselves up repeatedly for mistakes or let sexual purity become our entire identity. Another way to put these reactions that these cultures cause in us is what I'll call the dichotomy between obsession and suppression. And I find most women can sort their disordered relationship with sex and their own sexuality into one of these 2 categories. And often we experience facets of both in our lives. And I want to dive into these a little bit today for this solo episode. Just as some food for thought, nothing revolutionary, but maybe to help you sort your own experiences a little bit. into one of these extremes and therefore find the truth that transcends above both of them. And experiencing a suppressive relationship with sexuality is more of a fruit of purity culture. So our feelings towards sexuality, they can involve a lot of scrupulosity, a lot of fear, shame, self-condemnation as a result of these like unachievable tenets of purity culture, um, and the promises that are hinged on them. So stuff like, the more pure you are before marriage, the more you'll enjoy sex within marriage, or um, the more you give yourself away, the less you have to give a spouse. Like those kind of mantras are, or not mantras, maxims, I think is the word I'm still looking for. Um, those kinds of things create those feelings of fear, shame, and self condemnation. And there's so many more things I could say from purity culture that cause that, but they also cause us to experience a suspicion towards ourselves. Even when we are cultivating virtue, forming our conscience, acting in alignment with our human dignity, our integrity, we have this suspicion. And I find this is an easy attitude to have towards both ourselves and significant others in relationships. We assume our actions come from a base of use. That's our first posture towards ourselves is I must be using, I must be lusting, and which they certainly can come from that base. But rarely do we look at our actions and wonder if instead it's perhaps misguided passions, um, especially in committed and loving relationships. And this fear of ourselves leads us to believe that the approach to our sexuality needs to be kept as controlled as possible. Um, and in this suppressive place, we see sexuality as a threat or danger to us. It's too risky to really trust it in ourselves and in other people. Because again, the basis of most of our actions would be that we're using. We don't really know how to look at ourselves through a different lens. Um, the suppression's harmful because it's definitely not integration, which is a key word in the church's definition of chastity. If we're suppressing something, we're not embracing it. We're not trying to understand it. We're not allowing it to be refined and to flourish. And suppression, I guess, almost tries to say that sexuality is not a safe or important part of us. Um, or if it is important, it's not important now, and you have to be perfect in order for it to be important. Um, because otherwise, it should be something, again, kept under lock and key until it is perfect, and then it can be an important part of you. Or it, like we talked about in the purity culture episode, something kept under lock and key until you get married, and then it's released. So we suppress. Um, Obsession, on the other hand, as a result of hookup culture, it likes to say that sexuality is all we are. It's all we have to offer in our relationships. It's the most important part of a relationship. Um, and this is the attitude that engaging in hookup culture on any level can create in us. That sexuality and sex can be treated with this flippancy, or at least that it can just be directed and dictated solely by our desires or whims. It's this like penultimate thing that must be served. And this obsession makes sexuality an idol. It eclipses other beautiful and necessary aspects of the dignity of the person. When our sexual behavior is our identity, even just in subtle ways like um, serving as our way of de-stressing or regulating or coping or relating to a significant other or relating to others in general, it reduces the dynamic gift of being both body and soul into just one aspect. And so therefore it becomes disordered. Um, and this obsession with sexuality is also something I see regularly. And again, I see a lot of women vacillating between obsession and suppression. Obsession treats pleasure and sexual experience like it's a right, it's a necessity, it's not a gift. Suppression can treat the two, both pleasure and sexual experience and sexuality in general, like an enemy or a liability, which is also not a disposition of recognizing it as a gift. And that's something they have in common. And this is why, going back to the von Hildebrand quote, the truth is not necessarily between these two attitudes, but it's actually above them. Because the truth is that sexuality is a gift. It is a gift. It's characterized by gift. It's situated in the reality of being bodily. Um, it's situated in the reality of being both body and soul. As theology of the body talks about, like the body reveals the person. And so sexuality as part of that body soul composite, it reveals personhood. It reveals an aspect of who we are, especially as man or woman.
The Magdala podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Theology Show, presented by Ave Maria University. The Catholic Theology Show covers themes such as the value of a Catholic higher education, religious liberty, how to pray, the philosophies of St. Thomas Aquinas, and more. Stream episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and learn more by visiting the link below.
And so the truth of sexuality is above these two because they actually have a lot more in common than we think we do. It defines people by sexuality. Obsession defines it by sexual performance and sexual availability. Purity culture defines you by sexual purity. And then later in marriage, actually, by sexual availability as well. But it's, sexuality in reality it's meant to be surrendered to God and then looked at through the lens of revelation of his intention for the human person, his intention for communion to be triune. It's about letting it be part of our identity as person. That sexuality is an important and good and beautiful aspect of being a person, but it doesn't define all of it. It's meant to work in tandem with our souls, bodies, personalities, all that God has made us to be. We're supposed to feel an inner unity and an inner dynamism, the inner dynamism of being a sexual being. And but I think that's much easier said than done, right? Like we can't imagine that we're just going to arrive at this transcendent truth without a lifetime of work. But this is why, again, we're just recording this as food for thought for this episode is where do you find your behaviors situating the most? Do you find them situating themselves in an obsession of sexuality is who I am? This is what connects me to people. This is what gets me what I want. Um, this is my right. Sexual pleasure is my right. It's something I need. It's a necessity. I can't go without it. Because that's making an idol out of sexuality and sexual experience. That's obsession. Or is it suppression of I'm afraid of my level of desire. I'm afraid of my experiences. I'm afraid of myself in this. I'm afraid I'll never get better. I'm afraid this is going to control me. I'm afraid I can never be healthy. All of those things. Or like I'm incapable of selfless love in my sexuality or in my relationships. Those are the thoughts of suppression. And do you find yourself perhaps flip-flopping between the two? Of, oh no, like, we have to have these super, super tight boundaries because I can't even get close to sexuality because, again, I'm scared. Which, if you're wondering about boundaries in relationships, listen to our podcast episode from a couple weeks ago. Um, it was one of my favorites that we've recorded in a long time. Just a really good nuanced conversation about what it means to have boundaries in relationships and honor your sexuality. But anyway, um, do you find yourself perhaps vacillating between these two, um, and finding part of you wants to suppress and part of you wants to obsess, and you're on like this seesaw. And if you're on the seesaw, I want to say it's pretty normal. It's pretty normal to find yourself on the seesaw when you're engaging in regular compulsive behavior. And that the truth is actually that this is supposed to be a gift. It's supposed to be a gift to you. It's supposed to be a gift to other people. Whether you are engaging in moral sexual activity in a marriage or not. And I think thinking about our behavior through the lens of suppression or obsession maybe can help us see places where both of those things are disguised as the truth, but they are not the truth. Suppression and trying to approach sexuality with a safe mindset of like keep yourself safe from sin, keep other people safe from sin all the time. That's the wrong disposition. It's a negative one. We need positive reinforcement. We need to be going towards virtue, going towards love, going towards communion, going towards the plan of God for human sexuality. But those thoughts of I want to protect myself from sin, I want to protect other people from sin, that can look like the truth, right? But it's still not an attitude of gift. It's still not an attitude of integration. And conversely, sexual obsession, I actually see it a lot more than I wish I did, obviously, in Christian and Catholic spaces. Um, but this hailing of sexuality and sex as like the end all be all of marriage in particular, I think can get into this obsessive place of like, this is all right, this is a necessity, this is the best thing ever, rather than this is a refining place, that doesn't define who you are and in relation to other people. It's an important part of who you are in relation to other people, especially in relation to a spouse. But yeah, this hailing as the end all be all of human experience and relationship. Those thoughts can look like the truth, especially when we're talking about marriage, especially kind of couched in like pop TOB language. um, and that's a song for another time, but yeah, I mean, that could even look like the truth. But the truth is neither of those things. I think I'm currently working through Bishop Eric Varden's Chastity, Reconciliation of the Senses. And it is incredible, by the way. I'll probably end up recording something on this because I think this is the best book on chastity out there. It's just so unlike anything else I've ever read, and it's incredible. Um, but yeah, I mean, he ultimately likens chastity to like a deep peace with oneself, a deep peace with this interaction with the world. Um, and it's putting, I mean, his incredible work kind of in simplistic terms. But that's what it is. It's like it's this deep, this life, this dynamism, but this peace in that. That's integration, right? Is like I can experience the full dynamism of the gift, the full power of sexuality and all that it is, and be at peace because I know that it is working in tandem with my conscience. It is working in tandem with my vocation to which I'm called. It's working in tandem with my intellect and my will. And I think that's that transcendent truth, right? That's the truth of the gift, is that it's powerful, and powerful things are risky. Powerful things are not necessarily safe, but powerful things can be deeply good. I'm thinking of the C.S. Lewis quote about Aslan, like he's not safe, but he's good. I think the transcendent truth about sexuality that transcends above suppression and obsession is part of that's part of it too. Is that perhaps this isn't safe. Maybe that's not the word for sexuality. But it's because it's powerful. But that doesn't mean it's not good. Um. So anyway, this is a nice little framework, hopefully, for you to think about your behavior in a different lens. Nothing pivotal. Um. But yeah, maybe reflect a little bit on where you find yourself in that binary, if at all. And how to find that transcendent truth of sexuality being gift, sexuality being integration, or chastity being integration, sexuality being something that you can make incredibly deep peace with. And you don't have to vacillate anymore. You don't have to be on the seesaw anymore between putting it in a corner, locking away in a box, and defining your entire self and all your relationships and how you relate to other people by it and your worth by it. So yeah, thanks for riding with me on this over-caffeinated but overtired wave, and we will catch you back on the Magdala podcast very soon. God bless you all.
Thanks for listening. Check out more podcast episodes, blog posts, and how to get involved with Magdala by visiting our website, magdalaministries.org. Your love is meant to change the world. We hope to see you soon.